They couldn't wait to restart the bombing. Syrian government forces ignoring U.S.-Russia talks to extend a 7-day truce and hitting rebel positions around Aleppo, including, according to volunteers, an aid convoy in a Red Crescent warehouse. We're going to take stock of 7 days of truce that included both genuine lulls in fighting and flagrant violations, including the U.S.-led coalition's mistaken bombing of Assad forces fighting ISIS. Now comes Barack Obama's last annual opening of the United Nations General Assembly. He's both rival and partner to the Russians. Rival when it comes to the Assad government, potential partner in the fight against ISIS. Our attempts to revive the ceasefire, a pipe dream, and more broadly, after a presidency that's included deals with Cuba and Iran, will this UN week, well, mark the end of an era? In the France 24 debate, we're wondering if it's so much for diplomacy, the question that we're asking with Manuel Lafont-Rapnouil. He is the director of the Paris Bureau of the European Council on Foreign Relations. Welcome back to the show. Good evening. Journalist Dimitri de Kochko joins us as well.
Good evening.
Welcome back. Welcome back as well to France 24's very own Sanam Chantier, who's been following all the speeches at UN headquarters in New York this Tuesday. The France 24 debate, where you can join the conversation on Facebook and Twitter, the hashtag F24debate. Now, the latest from UN headquarters isn't necessarily happening inside that main assembly hall. A meeting on Syria taking place in a nearby hotel. It featured both Sergei Lavrov and John Kerry, this amid bitter recriminations between Moscow and Washington over the failure of an agreement to enforce the truce. The French foreign minister, by the way, characterizing the mood in the room as dramatic. So when it was Barack Obama's turn to go to the rostrum at the UN General Assembly, what tone would he strike when he spoke? Well, when it came to Russia, he was forceful when it came to Russia's intervention in Eastern Europe, but diplomatic on the issue of Syria.
And are now at work helping to fuel both Syria's tragic civil war and the mindless medieval menace of ISIL. The mindset of sectarianism and extremism and bloodletting and retribution that has been taking place will not be quickly reversed. And our international community must continue to work with those who seek to build rather than to destroy. And there is a military component to that. It means being united and relentless in destroying networks like ISIL, which show no respect for human life. But it also means that in a place like Syria, where there's no ultimate military victory to be won, we're going to have to pursue the hard work of diplomacy that aims to stop the violence and deliver aid to those in need.
No ultimate military victory to be won. Sanam Chantier, what did you think of Barack Obama's speech? Were you expecting this, the tone he struck when it came to Syria?
The jab, certainly, I don't think it came as a surprise to any of us, especially because there are a lot of questions surrounding who hit the UN convoy that was trying to enter the much-needed, desperate for aid, rebel-held areas.
Yeah, the United Nations more cautious than at the outset. They're no longer speaking of a bombing, they're speaking of an attack instead.
Also, you have to keep in mind that Barack Obama is using words like unity and cooperation now, even though the two countries have seen at odds when it comes to the future role of Bashar al-Assad from the beginning. I think they have come together now, and as our own Foreign Minister Jean-Marc Ayrault said, this is the last glimmer of hope that we can have for the other players to be able to take this process further. So yes, there's been a lot of finger-pointing, there's been a lot of toing and froing, but they gathered again prior to Obama's speech, the heads of state, and they bashed it out. Thankfully, this time they didn't storm out as they did over the weekend, and they've pledged again to meet on Friday. So they're still going at it.
They're still going at it, but going at it behind closed doors in a way.
Indeed, it is behind closed doors, and we're not hearing anything other than the fact that the ceasefire is not dead. We've heard this from both sides, but what has become a bone of contention here is the fact that tensions are rising between Moscow and Washington that have decided to partner together in this big conflict. One side is saying that the other airstrike against the Syrian soldiers was not unintentional. The other is saying, you haven't put enough pressure on the Syrian government to provide these permits for the convoys to go in. And now that you have, you were aware exactly of the route. Why is it that they've been hit? So it's a very difficult position to be in. But like I said, they're not giving up quite yet.
All right, on the hashtag F24 debate, Tim saying the bombing of aid trucks in Syria, the latest horrific act in a horrific war with absolutely no winners. Syrian civilians face this every day. Manuel Lafont-Rapnouil, your thoughts on Barack Obama? How's he playing this?
Well, when they discussed the cessation of hostilities with Russia, the US planned the truce to last for 7 days, which means, and now on the eve of the General Assembly opening, as you mentioned, which was probably something meant to get some momentum for this diplomatic showdown in New York. And there's a meeting of the Security Council, which was, I think, meant to celebrate the success of the cessation of hostilities and try to push forward. So for him, the failure of the cessation of hostilities is damaging the records that he wants to varnish when he's exiting. He said that was his last speech in New York at the UN. So I think that was his mindset, trying to salvage what can be salvaged and to make a case for not calling the ceasefire dead already.
How do you explain the breakdown?
I explained the breakdown because this was a negotiation basically between the US and Russia. And the US and Russia, it's not the bipolar world anymore. They are not sufficient. Maybe they're necessary for an agreement in Syria, but they're not sufficient. They don't have control over the actors. Now, Sergei Lavrov blames John Kerry for not having control over the rebels. John Kerry blames the Arabs for inciting the rebels to keep on fighting, and also accuses Sergei Lavrov not to have control over Assad forces. They both don't have control. And it's not that they are not willing to go through that process of a cessation of hostilities and trying to get some little humanitarian assistance to the people in need, which is 13 million, by the way, people in need of humanitarian assistance in Syria these days. It's not that they are not really trying to do it. They don't have control, and they are, to my mind, they look like they are locked in this bilateral process, and that process has no traction on the ground.
Dmitry Dukochko, you agree the US and Russia don't control the situation on the ground in Syria?
I'm not sure the problem is of the control or not control. The problem is to know what did the American wanted. And by agreeing on this truce between Kerry and Lavrov, that is the first question. Was it just a play on time from the American side to allow their allies of rebels, in which they do not separate moderate or so-called moderate rebels from the Fatah al-Shams, who are in reality al-Nusrat,
you're saying
who are
this
in
is
reality
all
al-Qaeda.
This is all strategy around the Battle of Aleppo.
Of course, it's the Battle of Aleppo. Of course. So was it just a play on time? Are there different tendencies among the American administration? There were always about the Middle East, but in general, the administration followed the orders.
So you don't take it at face value when the Americans say that their number one priority is to take on ISIS?
Why have they attacked the Syrian troops in the Deir ez-Zayt when the ISIS, when the Daesh was attacking them at the airport?
They say it was a mistake.
And it was, yes, 4 mistakes. There were 4 mistakes. You know, it doesn't become a mistake when there are 4 mistakes, and then when stop bombing, when the ISIL has taken already in some positions of the Syrian army. Then about the convoy, you say it was the accusations are against Syrian forces and Russian. They deny it, you know. And they even say
Can
that
I just chip
there
in
are
for a
not...
moment? They do deny it, however. We know for a fact that there's no way that the rebels have at any point had access to air raids. Secondly, it's very unlikely that the US... It's very unlikely that the US-led coalition would have hit one of their own. So it leaves us only with the Russians and Syrians.
No, they do. They say there is no tracks of bullet holes or bombing holes on the trucks and the lorries which had been hit, and they say that it has happened in the rebel zone controlled by rebels, that the the humanitarian aid had already been delivered and that the trucks burned, the tracks out of burning when al-Nusra has
let's not discuss
to attack Aleppo.
Let's not discuss the specifics of this attack.
It is another position.
The US have attacked Daesh since the beginning of the coalition strikes in Iraq. So maybe you don't believe that that one was by mistake, but they're fighting Daesh. Whereas we know that, and that makes a lot of mistakes, if it was mistakes, that the Russians and the Syrians are indiscriminately hitting civilians, hospitals, humanitarian...
no proof of that. We have proofs on Kunduz. We have proofs on Yemen.
What would proof mean to you? The admittance of the Russians for them to
show the hospitals which have
I
been
work
hit,
at France 24.
which
We've
have
been covering
hit
this
by
on a
the
daily
so-called
basis.
Russian or
The civilian
Syrian
targets getting hit. We
no.
have footage of it. There's material of this. What proof do you need?
You can show that there are the destructions, but there are no proofs of Russians attacking hospitals. I'm sorry, there are not.
Moscow's denying it, that it bombed the aid convoy in Aleppo. As for its coverage at the start of the day this Tuesday, state television showing the Russian army providing humanitarian aid to a neighborhood controlled by the regime in Aleppo. The Kremlin denial contradicted, though, by those that are in the field.
This is the warehouse of the Syrian Crescent. Abroad this house were more than 20 vehicles, 20 trucks full of food and flour and medicine and bombers and blanket. Today is 19 September of 2016. At the evening, exactly the evening, 7:30 o'clock, the regime helicopter targeted this place with 4 barrels. The refugee agency, the UN refugee agency.
Dmitry Dukashko, the early indication on the ground is that there was an air attack.
But they say they deny it. I haven't been on the spot, I'm sorry, yesterday. But I know what the Russians say and the Syrians say and what is said by different other sources. But you have mentioned that UN is more careful about the air attack.
They've rolled back.
They say just attack.
All right, Emmanuel Lafont-Rapnouil, how is this going to unfold now? Because we have this other meeting scheduled for Friday.
Yeah. They have a meeting scheduled for Friday
as
because
we saw Barack Obama playing it cautious in his speech. He didn't throw down the gauntlet to Moscow and Damascus when it came to Aleppo. He didn't mention Aleppo in his speech.
basically, I see that agreement as a freezer agreement. They want to freeze the situation. Cessation of hostilities with no political dynamic, no political effort, just try to reduce violence and increase humanitarian assistance to kind of make it tolerable until the exit of the Obama administration. That's really if it's not the case, then what else are they trying to do? So they've tried that again. They tried truces already several times. They've tried it again. It failed. They want to salvage it if it can be salvaged. They're going to try it, but they could not salvage it today. And they could not salvage it today because the only conclusion on which they agreed is we need to have the parties on the ground respect these agreements that we decided on our own a week ago. How is this political decision in New York going to translate on the ground? I don't see it. And they don't say anything about that.
This, because we've seen, we've covered extensively these big meetings in Geneva with lots of nations represented at the table, and we know that those didn't work. The idea that the Russians and the Americans in this case would go somewhere quiet and do this just on their own, did that have a better chance at the outset?
That's not new. It's not with these agreements that it started. The former UN mediator, like BARNEY, that was his plan. His plan was that the solution was in a deal between Russia and the US. And so he tried to push for such a deal already several times. And then he quit, and Staffan de Mistura started his mediation. But the US and Russia, the US and Russia kept on trying to have that kind of agreement. As I see it, I'm not saying that the solution is on a meeting with 30 delegations around the table that don't agree on most of things at the start. But having an agreement with so little guarantees, so little means, leverage on the ground, and so little consultation to get ownership from both the regional parties, second, the parties on the ground, is dead on arrival.
So what's the alternative, though?
The alternative, no, actually, the effort these days are not focused on the political solution. They are focused on making the situation more tolerable on a humanitarian standpoint. I would like the same.
The idea that what? What's the idea behind that?
The end goal is for them, so this is a trust-building exercise, and this is what it was sold to us as, so that they can move on and collaborate together in the fight against the jihadists in the region.
Exactly. The idea is that you're going to have a truce. The truce is going to build trust. The trust is going to allow not only Russia and the US to cooperate militarily by striking Daesh, which the US military is not that fond of, but also that the parties on the ground would collaborate. How can you have parties on the ground cooperate when there's no political framework for that? That is not sustainable. You need a political framework. You need something. You need some political dynamic. You don't need a full-fledged solution.
Regarding that Friday meeting.
Yes, I am.
Dimitri Koshko, are you as pessimistic?
I don't. No. I hope. I always hope. But I don't know. I don't know who wants what in the American administration. It's
who
possible,
wants what in all parties? Why just the US administration?
It's possible Obama and Kerry want exactly what you are saying about it. I mean, a truce and freezing the conflict and trying to find a beginning of a political solution. But I'm sure that in the American administration and in the, elites of America, there are a lot of people who do not want that and who want to pursue their plan against Assad, to continue the chaos and to support the terrorist groups they have trained with the objective, and that Russians are persuaded of that. And you know, if you don't know that, you cannot understand the policy of Russia.
All right,
they think they are trained to be used in Caucasus and in Central Asia after Syria,
right,
even at the same time.
And with the death of Karimov, we're going to have to take a break.
With the death of Karimov in Uzbekistan, it is very, very.
We're going to have to take
and elections in Kyrgyzstan.
We're going to have to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll hear the French mindset. François Hollande, much more pointed in his remarks. Stay with us.